Hello guys and welcome back to another episode of Supercoach mates. Well, the first lot of match simulation matches are over and done. So we're just going to spend the next little bit just quickly giving an update on our own teams, and also some of you guys have sent in your own teams. So we're quickly just going to go through them and give sort of our thoughts and our ratings and sort of an area where we think you might be good at, an area where you might need to improve on. So the first team we're actually going to look at is Jonas's team, which I'm just going to get up now. So I'll let Jonas himself talk about his own side. So whenever you're ready, Jonas, please fire away with your own side.
I see we're starting with its best team and then going down. So I'm pretty happy with this team at the moment. Obviously, subject to change. I've only got the 9K in the bank, so I can't do too many changes. But yeah, down back, it's been strange because a few months ago we would have all locked in Gota, potentially Caulfield, and McKenna. But apparently McKenna had a shocking preseason game. Gota's been in and out of the team. And I'm not sure on Caulfield at the moment. So I've brought in Jack Bowes after his impressive performance, albeit against a weak Hawthorn team. But I think he racked up 20 touches in one half of footy. So for me, that's pretty impressive. So at 277K, that's one I like the look of. Is that someone you also would select in your team, Nathan?
Well, I'd like to know exactly what his role is in Geelong's best side, because from all reports, I believe he played a bit of everywhere. Which does concern me a little bit, given that someone else who's in your side, I see Elliot Yeo, who's also in mine at the minute, tends to have the same reputation as being a bit of a Mr. Fix-It. So if Jack Bowes becomes that player for Geelong, are you worried about his scoring at that price? Perhaps fluctuating a bit and perhaps impacting a bit on where you might see him at the end of the year.
Yeah, so I think that versatility is good for his job security in one sense. So I don't think he's a sub-risk, touch wood. But yeah, his scoring might fluctuate a bit. But then you've also got to keep in mind, he is 277K. If he has another game where he has 30 touches in a full game of footy and scores 120, his price will spike and that will sort of compensate for a few 70s that he might dish out. So for me, I think at that price, and I think his ownership will grow a bit, he's one I'm willing to take the risk on. And yeah, hope he gets up to 400K, 450K. And then after, say, 6 to 10 rounds, you sort of trade him out then. Same with Elliot Yeo. He looked really good in the practice game.
Yeah, he looked great.
Yeah, he looked back to his old form, didn't seem impeded by an injury. So he's one I'm definitely locking away. I'm very comfortable with that pick. Nick Dacos and Doherty aren't locked in. I didn't mind Doherty's role. The only thing that concerned me was he didn't take many kickouts and he played a bit down back. So
yeah, I did.
It's sort of like, do you pick Doherty because of that early fixture and mid-time, or do you go with someone more consistent like a Dawson or potentially someone with that ceiling of Stewart? So that's something I'll decide after next week's practice game. Same with Dacos. I want to see how he goes again next week, but played pretty well in the intra-club. Nothing spectacular, but it suits my structure. So for the moment, he's in there.
Yeah, I do have one more question about your backline, but we'll come back to that because it's going to be addressed in one of your other lines.
Yeah, no worries. So then we'll move on to the midfield. Obviously,
It's
a subject to change, but I like Gimby's security and Constable's role is pretty good, so they can stay there. So in the midfield, Bont and Laird have been in there for a while. I don't see that changing. Laird is basically a lock for me. Captain option. Doesn't really get tagged. Racked up plenty of the ball in the preseason game. He looks pretty raring to go. So I'm pretty comfortable locking him away. I think Adelaide will be a bit of a better team as well. Get a few more wins, which will only help Laird. And it looks like Keys is being pushed out of the middle a bit more, so I don't think Laird's going to be going anywhere. I've brought Steele in. He looked good apparently in the practice match. I only watched a bit, but at that price, I think it's worth the selection because he can very easily be a top 8 mid. Hopper sort of speaks for himself. And the two GWS boys, well, Tom Green, I always rated him more than Tom Mitchell, just because of the fact he's on the upward and he had something like 50 touches in an intra-club match. So it's hard to ignore that sort of stat line. So for me, he's locked in for the same reasons which we've already discussed in previous podcasts with his upcoming fixture in Toronto and Hopper leaving. Callahan's the interesting one. I haven't actually seen any vision of him playing, but apparently he's had a ripper preseason and was doing really well in the intra-club match. So one where he's on the watch list and could potentially be a really good option. Bit of a unique as well. So we'll see about that. And then obviously the rookies there are placeholders, but apparently all of them had very good preseason games, so they're locked in.
Yeah, I actually do like this midfield. I think it's a very well-rounded midfield. Obviously you said you haven't seen Callaghan play before, or you haven't seen any vision of him.
GWS are very secretive when it comes to giving us vision. There's a few players I want to see some vision of. I want to see Lockie Whitfield, for instance, and people might scoff at that, but he had 34 touches playing at half back, so he could be a decent option to start in the midfield and then potentially switch down back after round 6. So one I'm not crossing off. If he really impresses in the next match, he's going to cause some headaches for me because he could be that sort of point of difference that no one else really picks up on. And then you get him at the start of the season paying 470k and other people jump on when he's defense eligible. But by that stage, he's 550k, for instance. So
yeah,
that's another one I'm curious to see.
And what about Chin Cotter? So obviously I know the rookies are placeholders. So did you like his game on Friday for Carlton? Obviously, for Carlton, obviously you picked him at this stage. Do you think he can play in round 1? Do you think he can be a bolter?
I'll be honest, I didn't really know who he was until I started watching the game. And then I noticed he was racking up a bit of the ball and he did a few impressive things. So apparently he's competing with a spot against Lockie Cowan. So I think one of them gets it. It's just a matter of figuring out who. But at 102k, defender, midfielder, eligible, is one you can just slap on the bench for now and hope he plays. And even if, say, in round 4 or 5 he gets dropped, he becomes a half-decent loophole and you paid basement price for him. So one where I'm willing to take the risk if he lines up round 1.
Yeah. Otherwise, I don't think there's anything else I have to say about the midfield. I know McVee's is definitely just a placeholder at this stage, I presume.
I don't know what he looks like, but he had a good game apparently, filling in the hole that Salem's left.
Yeah. Otherwise, I don't have anything else to really say about your midfield. I think it's pretty structurally. I think it's quite similar to mine. So we'll move on to your ruck line.
Beautiful. So the one ruck who's been there since basically December, January has been Marshall. I won't speak too much about him, but he averages a lot higher when Ryder isn't in the team and Ryder has retired. So he's going to be ruck 1. Might play a bit forward at times, but at 500k is one I'm comfortably locking away. Madden, now I'm a bit unsure as to what to do with Madden with Lockie, McAndrew or whatnot coming in and potentially being an option. So if McAndrew plays, I might look at bringing him in. The only issue with that is, unfortunately, then you don't get that loophole option, which means for the first few rounds you might have to be captaining someone blind, which then poses the question, well, if you're doing that, would you rather then bring in someone like a Laird or an Oliver who you can comfortably captain, knowing you don't have the option of VCing someone because you have no loophole. So I think that only lends weight to the argument of having a clear captaincy option in like a Laird or a Tuke Miller or a Oliver or one of those sort of players. So let's see if McAndrew plays. If he does, I think we'll all have to start him. And then the one I've brought in recently has been Wits. I'm just sick of all these rock headaches, honestly. I don't want to have to mess around in the rock. You sort of know what you're going to get with Wits. There's no concerns regarding his job security. His durability seems a bit better. It's still not 100%, but it's better than a Darcy or an English. And he's a clear R1, so I think he's shed a few kilos. He's moving around the ground well. So for me, at the moment, he's in my team. I can't guarantee he'll be there in round one. If I need to find money somewhere, he's an easy one I can find money from. But you're saving a trade. If you're bringing in a Darcy or a Tim English, do you really trust them to play 24 games? And in Darcy's case, he might be spending time up forward. So I don't know. I'm sticking with Wits at the moment. I don't really like Lysette with Teakle in the team and Finlayson potentially. And I don't really like Darcy Cameron with Cox tearing it up. And there aren't that many other proper options that I can think of. So yeah, at the moment it's Wits. Grundy potentially could be okay, but with Gawn again, like it's too much. There's too much uncertainty for me. So personally, I'm favouring Wits. Do you have any
No.
issues with the Wits selection?
I don't have any issues at face value. My only issue is so sometimes, especially after a bit of a breakout year, which Wits probably had last year, they can sometimes have a bit of a lull the following season. You're not worried about that with Wits?
Not really, because he's the captain of the club. He's usually when people or players have this breakout season, it's when they're a bit younger and they don't have those games under the belt. Wits is a seasoned veteran. I think he'll back it up. And on top of that, he's got.
You just got to look who he's
stronger
tapping the
midfield.
ball to.
You think Gold Coast will only improve with Ben King coming back in the side, so that means more goals, potentially more CBAs, more wins. So for me, I think Wits is a safe 110. And to be honest, if he goes down in price a bit, that's okay. And if Tim English sparks a few games, but then you have to trade him out, you're sort of losing out with the trade anyway. So I'm happy to cop a potential drop in cash at this stage because no other real rock options are appealing to me, and just have that security and stability that Wiz provides.
Yeah, and I mean, you just got to look at who he's tapping the ball down to. You know, Gold Coast have got probably, at least on paper, one of the better midfield groups there with Miller and Rowell and Anderson. And they're probably the three main ones. Obviously, they'll have others going through there. So, I mean, those three on their own can win games just with their clearance work. So, yeah. Otherwise, the Marshall pick's good. We've been big on Marshall all preseason. I think his practice match, it was probably a bit on the quieter side, but it's only a practice match. So.
Yeah.
And he was rucking against Gawn and Grundy.
Yeah.
So I don't know how much you can really take a bit away from that.
Exactly.
And the Madden one, I think, just makes sense at this stage. There's no real sort of rookie ruck that's standing out at this stage other than McAndrew. So, I think just putting the money there. And we'll move on to the forward line now, which at first glance looks a little bit superstarish. Let's get your reasons behind this.
So I like those four premiums. There's a few question marks with Cornelio and Rosie, but Dunkley and Taranto are locked in. Cornelio's had a bit of a knock, I think, but we'll see how he performs in the next week's preseason game. And Rosie spent a bit too much time forward for my liking, given Butters wasn't even in the team. So that's something to monitor. But then again, some of the rookies that are available as forwards are some I don't want to be fielding. Like full forwards, for instance, like your Ben Kings, your Van Ruins. So it's stocking up with forward premiums seems like a pretty good option this year. Especially because you could be leaking some points if you're only running the three primos, and then you've got like a Philippou or a King or an Allen who could all in any given week score 30. So that's why I've gone the 4 forward premiums. And then I've got Toby McLean, who let's just see and hope he plays. Apparently he had a bit of a sketchy role in the intra-club match playing forward and wing and whatnot. But if he's playing round one, you know what his scoring output and ceiling are. So I think his price is worth it. And the new addition has been Radigalia. And this one's been a tough one, but there are a few things that I like about the pick. A, he's got the DPP eligibility. B, he's quite nicely priced. And C, he's gone down back and he takes some really good intercepts. So in the short term, I see his job security being pretty solid with Jack Henry out of the side and Tom Hawkins out of the side. He can provide some decent cover in case Marshall misses a week, for instance, as well as being a half decent on scorer if he plucks a few nice intercept marks. So at the moment, he's in my team. I wouldn't be completely against the idea of running Radigalia at R2 as a big risk, purely because of the options in the ruck line. But that's something at the moment I'm not too comfortable to run at R2, a 175k player. So I'll keep him at F6 at the moment. And the good thing about that is he holds off Fergus Green from playing on the field, who could also score quite low at stages. I think Radigalia and the way he plays as a full back will ensure he doesn't score 30s. Hopefully with a few big marks and nice moments, he can average around 65 to 70 and make some good money. And then, yeah, on the bench, I just got Fergus Green, who should play early on, and Drury, who I'm not sure about, but I'm a bit low on funds, so I had to find a 102k player.
Yeah, no, that's fine. This is where I'm gonna ask a couple of questions. So my first question is around Connor Rosie.
Yep.
So are you concerned with the addition of Jason Horne-Francis to this Port Adelaide side? Are you concerned about what his midfield minutes look like? Because obviously I'm presuming you picked Rosie on the expectation that he's going to be playing predominantly as a midfielder. So if Horne-Francis comes in and is basically another midfielder, along with Boak and Wines and Butters, are you concerned that perhaps he could be rotated a bit too much forward, which obviously will impact his scoring per se?
Yeah. It is a concern for sure. But then again, he had such a good back half of the year, which gave him a spot in the AA side. So I think Hinkley will play him midfielder, or at least enough midfield to warrant picking him. The other thing about Rosie is he is pretty cheap. 513k is very, very fair and reasonable. If you think about it, he's only 11k more than Nick Dacos, who's a second-year player who's prone to getting tagged. So if you look at it like that, I don't think Rosie's the worst selection. If Rosie was 550k, for instance, I would then be really skeptical of the pick. But at the price point, I think he's a top 6 to 8 forward. And if you're paying 513k for a top 6 to 8 forward at the start of the year, that's not a bad little option, especially because you're taking one of those potentially low-scoring forward rookies off the field. And I don't like many of the mid-prices in the forward line. If you think about it, there's a few that have reared their heads, like Zeeble, Ben Long, and Fife, none of which I have any confidence in. So to pick someone like Rosie is good. The only other forward premium I'd consider at this stage is Butters, but he's already been injured and I haven't seen much from him. So I think Rosie's almost the best from a bad bunch.
Fair enough. And Ratugolea. So I'm presuming you picked Ratugolea down there because of his position at this stage. Is rumored to be playing off the back line.
Yep.
So by all reports, I believe Josh Bruce from the Bulldogs is also playing off the back line and is about 15k cheaper than what Ratugolea is. If those rumours come true, is Ratugolea going to make way for Josh Smith? I mean, not Josh Smith, Josh Bruce. Or is Ratugolea just there safe as houses? What are you going to do there?
Ratugolea isn't safe as houses, but I don't really like the Bruce selection too much because he's forward only and he has a lot of competition down there with Darcy potentially. You've got Liam Jones, you've got Gardner, you've got Keith. There's a lot of people there. If you look at Geelong's tall stocks down in defence, they don't have nearly as much as the Western Bulldogs. And he did impress me, Ratugolea, in the preseason game. So for now, he's there. Certainly not locked and loaded, but then again, there aren't too many forward rookies that I love the look of at this stage. The only one I'd consider instead of Ratugolea potentially is Ben King. But then again, coming off an ACL, also prone to score very low. We'll have to wait and see. If he kicks 5 goals in the preseason game this week, it'll be hard to ignore, but we'll worry about that when it comes to it.
Yep, and just one more really quickly. So obviously you've put an extra forward premium in, and you'd probably taken it out. I'd say of probably the back line.
Yep.
Have you perhaps thought about getting rid of one of your forwards and putting it into the back line per se if you don't stick with the Cornelio and or the Rosie options? Have you thought about what you're going to do with that extra sort of million you'll get from those two if you decide not to do them?
Possibly, but the problem with that is you'd be sacrificing a lot of points with your rookies. Like Constable could come and score 80, but if he's on your bench because you stocked up on defender premiums, that's a bit of wasted points. And if I'm fielding instead someone in the forward line who's not scoring very well as a rookie, I'm already down, say 30 or 40 points. So it doesn't even matter if the premium that I've got in the back line is outscoring Cornelio by 10 points, for instance. Because if the rookie in the back line that I'm missing out on, say Constable's going 80 and Ben King's going 40, I'm net negative of 30 points. So for me, that's something that I'll probably not do. Albeit it is tempting to pick some of these defensive premiums like a Dawson and a Sicily and a Stewart. But yeah, you can't pick them all. It's got your structure is dictated by your rookies basically. So I think that's how we're going to have to alter how we play this year.
Yeah, I think that's fair enough as well. I actually myself flirted with that idea of getting rid of one of my. Oh, that's not good. One of my premiums down back. I haven't really settled on anything yet. But yeah, no. So I think overall, I think you've got it's a really strong side, obviously. But yeah, obviously the rookies are always going to change, and it just depends on who comes in and who comes out. So at this stage, it has my tick of approval.
Excellent. I'm glad. Yeah. So this has been my team. Obviously, there'll be a fair few more changes come round one, but at the moment, every pick that is in here has in some way or manner impressed over the preseason. But there are a few people that are on the watch list that we'll have to look at, for instance, a Whitfield or a Parish and the like. So, yeah, nothing's set in stone at the moment, but a few other premiums that we want to have a look at, and mid prices, especially. Like, I'm sure Nathan, you as well want to see another game out of Yo and Bose just to double check, as
Yeah.
well as say a Caulfield, see if he's going to really tear it apart in the next game and then make it difficult to ignore him. But we'll see how we go. I think it'll be good because we'll get some stats next week to be able to tell properly whether or not these players have that scoring potential.
Cool. All right. So after looking at Jonas's side, the next side we're going to look at is Thomas's side. So we're just going to get this up now. So Thomas, do you want to maybe just give us a quick overview of sort of your side and perhaps some of your picks and why you've picked them?
Yeah, I mean, it's a pretty stock standard side to, I guess, a lot of people's sides floating around on social media at the moment. Was tossing and turning between the structure wise, whether I wanted to go a bit deeper. Originally, I had it deeper in the defense, but I decided against that because I think there is depth in the rookies. Bowers, obviously. I think Jonas you've got him as well, have you?
Yeah.
So I guess we'll wait and see on how that goes in the Pracky game next week to see where exactly he plays, because I don't think I'm not confident on his role at the moment, but he seemed to dominate Hawthorn, which was good to see. And yeah, I mean, Yo and Bowers, if they're good to go, I mean they can score pretty well, and I guess it negates any issues about having another premium and a rookie, which means Constable, Ginby obviously placeholders at the moment. Constable's apparently running right off half back and doing all right for himself, which you can't complain. Mids, I'm a little bit concerned with the rookies that I've got other than Ashcroft, Phillipou and Phillips all on field is a little bit risky. Ideally, I want to go one deeper. Rucks I'm pretty happy with. Witzel was not so sold on, but now that he's playing round one against a ruckless Sydney, I mean, McAndrew's rucking for them, but Witz should go pretty big against Sydney. And it could be one that if you miss out on him, it'd be chasing points. I think with him forward line, wanted to have the 4 premiums. The reason I haven't gotten Rosie ahead of Goulden, I've gotten Goulden ahead of Rosie, is purely a cash thing as well. But I think based off what I've seen with Goulden, if he can maintain that mid-rotation and be prominent in that midfield, I think that's a positive. Rosie was playing half forward fair bit in that match simulation, was rotating with Jason Horne-Francis, and I guess with Butters in there, that adds a bit of an issue. And the other one is Zeeble. I think I've got him as a purely placeholder for that price point. I'm kind of tossing up between, flipping someone like Phillipou forward and now putting McAndrew on F6 with the news that we've heard of Hickey and Laddams being out. But Zeeble is in there as a placeholder. Could easily be Horne-Francis, but I think even Callahan as well, Windhager in the mids, that stocks up a rookie spot up there, could actually be quite positive. But that's what I've got so far, and I'm pretty happy with it.
Yep. I'll let Jonas run his critical analysis and start to fire away some questions, which I'm sure you no doubt have.
Sure. I like the structure. The structure is good. It's more some of the picks that I have a concern with. So, for instance, Goulden. Do you see Goulden finishing the year being a top 6 to 8 forward?
Yeah, well, I want to say yes, but I don't think so. He could easily be top 6 if he plays midfield, but I reckon gut feel says he could start the year off strong and then taper off. He could do a Dylan Moore and just consistently be good. We'd never expected Dylan Moore to be consistent as he was, and he did so, and I think no one ended up picking him because he just kept going up and up in price. Obviously, Gordon's a bit more expensive, but they've got a good opening fixture against Gold Coast, so he could actually score quite well. I think I'll wait and see with him next week if he's still in that mid rotation as a starting mid without Warner and Mills being prominent. Then I guess I'll happily take him. But on the flip side, if you are picking him, I think that comes with that caution that I think he fits in that similar mold as a Butters, where I just don't think his body can hold up for 22 games in the midfield. there is that risk that he just starts to break down as a young kid. And he's not the biggest guy on the block. He's not like a Paddy Cripps or even a Rosie can hold up a bit better. But yeah, I think at 472k, I put him in there just to flip money around elsewhere. But as I said, if I can end up, and I probably will put McAndrew F6, that it frees up another 40k and that goes straight back to Rosie. And I think long term, Rosie outscores Goulden, because I've seen Goulden play live and I can see him getting lost a few times in midfield. He apparently had massive CBA numbers and did quite well from what I saw in the snippets of that Pracky game. But yeah, across round one, it's a whole different ballpark when you've got a fully fledged opponent rather than a half a missing Brisbane outfit.
That's true. Yeah. Also, so could you walk us through the Merritt pick and why you selected him over some of the other 600k-ish midfielders?
Yeah, it's a tough one because originally I had Neil, then he didn't look that great in the intra-club. Not intra-club, the Pracky game. Then, wasn't overly keen on Oliver and Laird, even though it could actually be a mistake not starting both of them the way they're going in preseason. They both were flying. And the other options, obviously, McRae. I mean, I picked this before the Bulldogs intra-club, so wasn't too sure what McRae's CBA numbers would look like, but he actually looks like quite a good pick this year. And the other ones, I guess, Parrish is another one. But I think if I was purely picking between the two Essendon boys, I like the look of Merritt more than Parrish. I think we mentioned that on the Twitter feed post that we posted in the team reviews after the Pracky games. But if I had to compare between the two just off the pure eye test, Merritt did just look fitter and cleaner, and Parrish did what he does best, which is gathering disposals, but I couldn't have seen that being a high Supercoach score just because it wasn't that convincing. Whereas Merritt was, he ended the game really strong and he was clean with his feet, and he's, definitely in there for his disposal efficiency, and I don't think the captaincy role has really phased him that much, but as you say there in what you mentioned, the negatives, he is a tag risk, but also, it's hard to say whether they go for a Parrish instead of a Merritt. Who knows what happens? Could well be a Merritt with his captaincy and try and negate that a bit and see if he can, opposition midfielders can get under his skin a little bit, given he is a captain. But yeah, he could easily, who knows what happens in a week's time, but I could easily flip that to a McRae or someone or even higher based off if I flip the rookies around to someone cheaper.
Yeah. What questions did you have, Nathan, if any?
I'm actually going to ask the same question to you, Thomas, that I asked Jonas. So I like the Wits pick. Are you a little bit concerned about, so sometimes we see quite often after someone has a breakout year, sometimes they can have a bit of a lull in their second sort of year after the breakout one. Are you perhaps a bit concerned that Wits could be that one and he sort of falls away from that sort of top echelon and just sort of falls back into the pack? What are you thinking about that?
I mean, first of all, I probably wasn't that satisfied with picking him up at 600k at the moment starting point. I think it's pretty high for what he's capable of. I think with the rucks, it's a bit of Russian roulette at the moment with what's available. Obviously, Darcy did do a significant amount of ruck type in Freo, but who knows what the ruck split will be. Grundy Gorn seems to be out the door with their even ruck splits. I think they'll just cancel each other out essentially, and English has got a concussion history, so if you're not going down to Lysette or now with the McAndrew stuff, if you go down to even a riskier point of difference with McAndrew in the rucks, you're left with literally Wits or nothing. And I think it's even better news now. He doesn't have to deal with Hickey or Adams. So he's rucking against a teenager pretty much that's pretty lean and raw. So he could go all over the place and monster him. I think I wouldn't say he's going to digress in scoring. It's different to midfielders where they may have a really strong year and start to get back into the rest of the pack in their second year. I think rucks will just score naturally well just because of the hit-outs to advantage. But I think he's one that something tells me that if you don't own him round one, there'd be a bit of a problem because I think I could see him going absolutely berserk round one. Having said that, Sydney probably have a plan in place to try and negate his ruck hit-outs to advantage, but I think if they manage to get Miller, Anderson, Rowell in that starting lineup or a complement of decent midfielders, he's going to win most ruck battles against a McAndrew. He's pretty skinny and lean, even though he is tall as well. It could cause a few troubles, but, it's hard to say with that, but I'm pretty happy with Wits at the moment if I can get McAndrew in the forward lines.
Yeah. And I'll let Jonas ask about Philippou.
Yeah, I don't mind the Philippou
And
selection
better.
for like job security purposes, but he seems to be playing quite a bit forward. And as a first year player playing forward in a team that's probably bottom 8, I'd be going out on a limb to say they're bottom 8. What sort of scoring do you see him putting out?
Oh, look, it's hard with Philippou because he's got extreme talent. There's no denying that. I saw him live as well when he took a few good pack marks. He kicked a goal from 55. So there's talent there. It's just, I think now with Billings injured for 8 weeks, there's a spot up there as a high half forward who can push in a bit. It's a tough one because I'd say if he's 120k, you take him and run with it. But 150 is a bit.
Yeah.
I just, I was looking at other options. Obviously, as we said, we keep saying McAndrew is another option, but you remove him out of the equation, there's not much left over. You got Jai Menzies the same price, so I'd take Philippou over Menzies just because Menzies is a small forward. Philippou could at least get a few more disposals around the ground perhaps, but it's just not much. You got Josh Sin, who's questionable at best. Davey from Essendon, who's probably not going to score any better. I'd say he's one that I could see playing high half forward, but he presents itself as a good matchup just because of his awkward height. So, if St Kilda end up playing with 3 talls, he'll pretty much be a 4th tall in essence because I can't see him being in the major 3. You got Membry, Marshall resting, and then if they give Caminiti a debut as a 102 forward, he'll take the number 1 defender and hope for the best. And yeah, I think they'll try and protect him a little bit from not getting exposed to a top 2 defender against the opposition. But I could see him doing quite well as a 3rd or 4th defender, and then really relishing that opportunity because he'll outsize most of those 3rd or 4th talls for sure.
Yeah.
Fair enough. Otherwise, I think Thomas, I think the rating 9 out of 10 now, I think that's probably fair enough.
Yeah.
I think it's probably on par with what Jonas's side's worth at the minute. So now what we're going to do now, so now that we've reviewed both of their guys, what we're going to do now is we're going to review some of your sides who have been sent to us on social media. So thanks for contributing. So the first side we're going to look at is from Cam, called Cam Suvalaki. So with these next ones, we're just going to give a quick sort of minute, just look at the side, and then we're going to flick over to the next slide, which is where sort of we discuss sort of whatnot. So I'll just leave this up on the screen for half a minute, and we can just have a think about sort of whatnot, and then from there we can just sort of go through a few discussion points from each of the sides. But on first glance, this looks a pretty good side here, Cam. So thanks for messaging us. Right. So now that we've all had a quick look, we'll move on to the review. Positive. So as I said, I like the structure you've got here, Cam. It's really, really good. Depth in both the midfields and the forwards is obviously a good thing. And again, we've discussed with in the positives and the negatives.
Yeah.
The negatives so this is actually my one. So I don't like the idea of having 2 mid prices in the midfield. That's just me. I think if one of them goes down, I think you're asking for trouble because ideally you'd probably want them to go up higher.
Yeah.
And then again, the other thing too is if they both don't fire, well then there's 2 trades that you're going to have to blow to get them up. But on the flip side though, it means that you're not having to worry about, like a new player coming in. Have you got anything to add there, Thomas?
Yeah, I mean you nailed it on the head with the two mid prices. I think there is a lot of risk attached to that, both in the same line as well. I guess it'd be a bit negated if it was across the mids and the forwards, but yeah, two in there is risky. It could well pay off because Hopper's a guaranteed lock in that midfield, and
Yeah.
Sheets to play big midfield minutes. I know that from when I watched that West Coast or bits and pieces of that West Coast game, they were trialing Tim Kelly up forward as well, so that could open up a consistent spot for Sheed. I like how it's got depth in most lines. Obviously, it's questionable with the defence because obviously, you say Caulfield and Gingme and McKenna are shoo-ins, but we don't know until round one with the rookie price players. But definitely in the midfield, you've got Sheed at M6, you've got two solid rucks, and you got Taranto at F4. So you've got the four, probably four of the top six forwards right off the bat straight away, barring injury. So yeah, again, we've spoken about Whit's being a strong pick, and you can't complain with that. I think I don't know if it was you and Jonas that put this one up, but yeah, getting Laird to Oliver by downgrading Sheed to someone like a Callahan. I think it was Jonas.
Yeah, it was.
He's had a duck off for the second half, but yeah, getting someone up to Laird would be quite handy, I think, because it could provide consistency with the captaincy score. Obviously, Bontempelli still rotating that captaincy alongside Parrish is not a bad thing, but I think if you're able to just even, if you don't want to have a Laird or Oliver and redistribute that 100k elsewhere, you could easily get a day cost straight up to a Stewart and not have to worry about the chance of him not scoring well as a second year player. And Callahan's been very impressive in that GWS game. Obviously, it's kind of a question mark on whether he can do it with the likes of Cornelio and Kelly in the side as well, but there is some positives there. But yeah, I'd say getting one more down from one of those 300k players is a better move in our opinion, I think.
Yeah, and obviously the other reason why we think that too, obviously the news just came out from Sydney about Hickey and Ladham's both not playing. So obviously Sydney are probably going to go with McAndrew as their number one ruck.
Yeah.
So yeah, if you can, you might not have a loophole if you decide to put McAndrew at R3. So if you don't have a loophole, then I think you potentially sort of got to blindly pick who you think the highest scorer is. And I think outside of Laird and Oliver, I think it's quite tedious at this stage to try and pick that blindly. But yeah, I think overall, Cam, we all really like your side. I think you've obviously been paying attention, which is a start. And yeah, obviously just keep sort of just watching the last sort of practice matches and then really just nailing in the other sort of picks around your structure and whatnot. But yeah, overall, Cam, I think really well done. And whatnot. So we're gonna move on to the next team now. So this team here is from Caden. So this was sent to us again. So thanks, Caden, for contributing to the podcast. So again, we'll just leave this up for half a minute and just have a quick
pretty similar structure
glance.
To or Jonas's as well.
Yeah, I think at first glance it looks pretty pretty bang on the money with what most other people are doing. So we'll move over now to our discussion points. I'll let you do this time, Thomas.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty solid. As I said, it's consistency with similar to my one with regards to the structure of it all. But I guess the risks that we mentioned with the premiums, if you've gone the top echelon premiums, you got your Laird in there, you got your Brayshaw, which is a really good differential, I think, bar the tagging possibility of round one. I think that the flip side of that is you've got a couple risky picks in there with Zeba, which I've got as there as a placeholder, as I mentioned early on, but he's got his own injury history. King's an interesting one because he showed I think he's pretty dominant in the intra club from what I'm aware of, and he didn't end up playing that first practice game, so there is risk with his injury. I think he's expected back round 1, if not round 2. But I think with the likes of Sheasel dominating and some other forwards that have shown that they're capable of, I don't think Caden's got McLean, if I'm not mistaken. So potentially could do a straight swap to McLean.
No, he does have McLean.
Oh, does he? Okay, so scrap that. Go down to McLean.
Oh, no, he doesn't. Sorry.
Oh, yeah.
No, he doesn't. Sorry.
Perfect. And McLean could be an option. You've got McAndrew, you've got Sheasel as options. And as you said, Bruce, if named in backline, who knows what his capabilities are of scoring. Something tells me he's going to be a bit of a lockdown defender, so scoring may not be amazing, but for 161k, it could even be better than some of the options. But as we said, we've listed a few options there. What are your thoughts with this side?
Yeah, well, obviously, Caden, so I'm actually the one that suggested Josh Bruce. And Jonas, early on in the podcast, wasn't that big a fan on him. But I think the one area the Bulldogs struggled last year was particularly intercepting in their back half. And I think if Bruce goes down there, obviously he started off as a defender. If he can become that sort of intercept defender that's a bit taller, sort of a bit similar to a Sicily or even like a Darcy Moore, then all of a sudden at 161k, I think he becomes a viable option for those who might be tossing up, between King and Van Rooyen from Melbourne. I think you can slot him in because I think he'll outscore both of those two as a backman.
Yeah.
And then there's your sort of your baseline rookie, if you will, in the forward line. And you might get 150k out of him. And then you could quickly move him on for someone who's a bit more reliable and whatnot. But yeah, I think the only other thing I would consider doing, so Zeeble is actually more expensive than Fife and Jason Horne-Francis.
Yeah,
if I'm not mistaken.
He's 10k more expensive than Jason.
Yeah.
It's about 30, 40 more k than Fife. Fife cheapest out the lot.
I think if I was in your position, I think I would probably have more trust in one of those two, given where I think both of those sides are going to finish this year, as opposed to Zeeble, who's probably going to be in the bottom two side. I think his scoring will fluctuate, especially if North Melbourne get smashed off the park. But if North Melbourne, can surprise and win a few games, then I think he becomes an option because he's a bit of a barometer for them. But yeah, I think the other thing with Zeeble too is he does seem to be someone who they don't mind moving around. Throughout his career, he's played off halfback, he's played off in the forward line, he's even played as small forward. And I think at that price, I think I would rather go with Horne-Francis or even Fife, who you know what you're going to get with Fife. He's going to be a forward. He might push up into the midfield on the occasion. And obviously Horne-Francis, I think, has that upward trajectory on him. And I think he actually helps Port Adelaide in terms of what they do, because they obviously play a defensive front half game. So obviously with him being in the midfield, if he's named in there and he can, show, what he was at Port Adelaide like he did in his under 18 year, then yeah, I think I would rather trust those two. But otherwise, Caden, on the overall, great side. The structure's pretty much the same as what everyone else is going. So, and we'll move on now to, so this is Tony's team. So thanks, Tony, for sending through your side. Again, we'll just leave this up for sort of 30 seconds, half a minute, and just have a quick glance over it and whatnot, and then we'll move over to the next slide.
Again, similar structure. I mean, structure-wise, I think if you're not going the McAndrew R2, then he's gone R3, but R2 you're not going wrong. I mean, 90% of the competition at the moment, I think, is very similar structured with this sort of setup, either going 6 deep in the mids or 5 deep.
Yeah. So now that we've had a look, we'll move on to the discussion points. So Thomas, I will let you do this.
Yeah. This was, as I said, structured sound. Solid picks with regards to premium. McRae is someone that I think, having watched the intra-club match they had on the weekend, or yesterday, or the day before, actually pretty good option in the midfield, considering that I think I mentioned on Twitter, he was playing, they were opposing sides, so Bontempelli was in one midfield group and McRae was in the other, given the slight concerns we had over McRae's role, but yeah, he played majoritively in the midfield, and if he was in the midfield, he was playing high half forward, but he pretty much was, started there and then moved straight into the gut, so I don't think we'll see any issues with him getting thrown out to a wing or something random, because I think with the rotational structure without Dunkley, I could see it being quite common, being Bont, McRae, and Libba. As Jonas mentioned, I think one thing you can improve on is, I think you're missing a lot of value in defence. Having Goda on the bench, you can free that up quite easily. I don't think Goda's a good option, given I don't think he played, didn't he, in the Cracky game? He had a foot injury or something along the lines of that.
Yeah, and he's also high priced because he played the last game of last year.
Yeah, exactly. He actually scored, I think he scored a 70 in that last game. So I think there's just a bit too much risk attached to his pick, given that the fact we haven't actually seen him, and we might not see him in time for round one. So you can go down with him and save yourself pretty much 70k if you go down to 120k player. Having Sheasel, McLean, and Philippou in there's a lot of money invest into your stocks in the forward rookies. So you could even potentially bump McAndrew down forward, get a 102 rookie in the guts and in the R3 position, and then save yourself with there. As Nathan pointed out, Grundy's a bit of a risk. I think now I saw him in the flesh and just didn't look 100% with regards to fitting into that Melbourne lineup perfectly. He probably, still sorting himself out. But I think the issue is because the ruck split, I think, was 60-40 to Grundy, or even 55 to Grundy and 45 to Gawn. So the ruck split is almost dead even. And I think that's impacting his scoring. If it was like 70-30 to Grundy, maybe. But they're kind of utilising both of their strengths as best as they can. Could be a different story come round one, but that's what I think it's going to be. And I think if you look elsewhere, Grundy and Gawn are kind of going to negate each other anyway. I don't think they're too worried about Supercoach scoring themselves. So they're going to be quite comfortable. But I guess, what are your thoughts, Nathan? And obviously, do you reckon it's worth him bringing McAndrew into an R2 position and going down that route, or bumping McAndrew into the forward lines?
I think McAndrew at R2 is quite risky.
Yeah.
It just depends on how long. I guess it just depends on how long McAndrew actually can stay in that Sydney side, because I think as soon as Hickey or Laddams are available, I think he'll be punted out.
Yeah.
So I think I'd be more comfortable having him in the forward line for that reason. Because I think I'd rather keep that R3 spot just as someone who's never going to play.
Mm-hmm.
Because you've always got a loophole in Madden or someone like that. Obviously for mine, the back line, I think the back line's actually quite similar to mine. And the forward line, that was my other thing, that's the forward line. So you've got 400k of rookies there on the field. I think you could probably utilise that money better by, perhaps punting one of those guys and getting in McAndrew, or switching him into that spot. Because the thing you can always do as well is you can always trade out McAndrew if he plays the 3 matches, which you probably don't want to be doing that at R3 if you don't have to. Because unless your 2 ruckmen get injured, you're probably not going to touch there. So, but otherwise, Tony, I think pretty good side. McRae, as I said, McRae, I think is going to be a good point of difference this year. That's pretty much my thoughts on your side. So yeah, thanks
Yeah.
for sending in your side.
Yeah. I guess before we wrap up, we will be doing another one of these, probably at the end of this week, next week, with Nathan's side as he's finalising his side. Obviously, all of our 3 sides will be yet to be finalised. But yeah, Nathan's will be next week as he's finishing off his final touches, and we'll send out the call if anyone else wants to send their teams in to be looked at and what they want their opinion from us, and we're more than happy to accommodate and stick that in the second lot of the video, which we recorded separately. And then after that, we got a few videos lined up for round 1. But yeah, round 1's definitely not far away. It's the first game's in just under 3 weeks, I think. So, or just over 3 weeks, sorry. So yeah, exciting times. We've got a few videos lined up. Probably end up, as we said before, we'll have our rookie review at some point, hopefully, fingers crossed. Not that all the rookies have already been ironed out by a lot of people online, but yeah, we'll go through that, and then we'll do our final preseason reveals probably in the week of round 1, and then we all good hitting round 1 with the hitting round 1 nice and quickly. But for until the next video, we'll catch you then.